Hi, friends. Hello, the world. Welcome back to this episode of Complaint Free Life. And with you, your host, Estelle Orbonova, with new headphones. And I'm hoping that the sound is going to be better than before. And I will, once I settle in one country, in one place, I'm hoping to get all the great sound all together. Okay, in the meantime, in my nomadic life, I am offering this sound. So, the topic that I want to talk about today is probably one of the solutions to all of our problems. And of course, I don't want to generalize it, but a lot of the keys of how to solve our problems, I think, lie in this topic. And that's why I really want to take time to talk through about it and also share my experience of how it is. And the topic is relationship with yourself. In other words, how are you showing up in your relationship with yourself? And when I say that, it may sound a bit like a schizophrenic thing of you talking to yourself and having relationship with yourself, but I really mean it in the best possible loving way of looking at this topic, even if you are very skeptical about it, even if you feel like, well, who really has time for it, or whatever it is that your brain might be reacting to what I'm saying. But I'm promising it's not like a coach talk. It's really an essential part of realizing where a lot of the solutions might lie, and you might not have looked for it there yet. So that's why this is, if you worked on anything in your life, this would be top on the list. So, relationship with yourself, or relationship that we have with ourselves. And you've probably heard this from many other sources that says the longest, the intimate, the more time we spend with anyone would be ourselves, right? And how do we do that? How do we show up in our own relationship with ourselves? Is a very fascinating topic to think about. So, what I'm going to talk about here is how it could look like. How do you know what kind of relationship you're having with yourself? Why you might be having it, and what to do about it once you realize that maybe this is not the way you want to show up, or maybe there are things that you want to improve on and you want to do things differently, and how you could do that. Okay, let's start from the start. So when I say relationship with yourself, even when I was thinking about it myself, there are lots of topics came up of, oh, this could be about the relationship with yourself. This could be about, and of course, I don't want to package all of them together. So I will try to constrain it as much as possible to talk about the basics of relationship with yourself. So the way that I see from myself, from my clients, from people I talk to, we have the spectrum of how we treat ourselves and how we show up to ourselves, how we are in a relationship with ourselves. If I were to define it, or if I were to show you, it would be like a spectrum. So you're imagining a spectrum, on the one side being um, a very punitive relationship with ourselves, of treating ourselves badly, punishing ourselves every chance we get, criticizing ourselves, avoiding ourselves, forcing through things and not really paying attention to, or saying that this is how it is and we have to go through it, and just powering through, right? That would be on the one side. And on the other side, the relationship with ourselves, where it's respecting, it's understanding, compassionate, learning, rewarding, honoring relationship. and a lot of the things in between. Now, the question is that you could ask yourself is, where do you fit in that spectrum? Obviously, these are the extremes of the spectrum, right? So the one that I'm talking about is the extremes. But fascinating enough that I see so many of my clients, and including myself a few years ago, I was on this side of the spectrum where I would be so prone to punishing myself, so prone to saying bad things about myself, so prone to saying I don't matter, I'm not worthy. Why would I do this? I have to be flexible. I have to be accommodating of everyone else's needs but myself, right? So I would be on this spectrum of how I would show up in the relationship with myself, or at best avoiding it, meaning even if I had certain concerns, even if I had certain desires, I would be so quick and good at ignoring or avoiding it and not paying attention, or saying that in the big scheme of things, these don't matter, right? So you can relate probably to any or most of what I'm saying. Now, when we have this type of spectrum of feelings or actions that we're doing towards ourselves, right? On the one hand, we're trying to punish ourselves um, in not allowing ourselves to make a mistake, or punishing heavily for making a mistake, or criticizing, or even I've seen people say, like, I rather criticize and say all the things of what's bad about me so that others don't have even anything to add, right? So there is that. And the other one is understanding, knowing that we are likely to make mistakes in order to learn. We always have a chance to learn, being compassionate about it, expecting that some of the days we're not going to be the way that we expect, honoring what's true for us, understanding what's coming up for us, what's our honest way of seeing things and doing things. So when we have all of this and we uncover how we are really showing up in our own relationship to ourselves, how are we treating ourselves in our daily lives, especially in days when things don't go the way we want to, and how we treat ourselves, right? And when we do that, you can think of why it's important that we notice that, it's important that we bring to our awareness of how our relationship to ourselves is. There are many, many reasons I could think of, but some of the one that I really want you and myself remember the whole time, right? The why it's important that we do it is because the way we show up in our own lives, in our own relationship with ourselves, is also the way we are building relationship with others. The way that we are problem solving in our lives is really reflective of how we are showing up in ourselves, with ourselves, how we're setting boundaries with others, is also how we're treating ourselves and how we are showing up with ourselves. So our relationship to ourselves is not only important for building relationship with others, it's also important to understand how we are achieving all of our goals, how we are structuring our days, how we are dealing with difficulties and challenges. All of this lies in how we treat ourselves. All of this is coming from how we are showing up in our own relationship with ourselves. Right? So these are the reasons. So in other words, if we want to have amazing relationships with others, if we want to have all the things that we want in our lives, to achieve all the things we want, then we better look at how we're treating ourselves and how we're having a relationship with ourselves. Because as long as we are on this punitive part of the spectrum, we're not going to go far and we're going to be struggling all the way through to get to where we want. And we will even make it worse, and we may even end up stagnating because we don't really find the strength to go all the way to achieving our goals, because every mistake we make, we tend to punish ourselves, or we tend to have relationships that we allow those relationships to be abusive because we abuse ourselves a lot, right? Or we don't respect ourselves, we don't honor ourselves, we don't really set boundaries for ourselves. Therefore, if others are doing to us, we don't even notice it, right? So you've seen that, because I can think of so many examples that that I can come up with. So one of the extreme examples is that I grew up in the family where violence was somehow accepted, and violence was a way of solving things, in quotes, right? So my father thought that using violence would be another way of solving problems. Of course, it exacerbated, made it worse, but in his eyes, this is how things were. Violence was the another resort to rely on. So growing up with that mindset, and then thinking that's quote unquote normal, and I would be in relationships where I would not even notice other people verbally abusing me. I wouldn't even notice it because as long as they didn't hit me, it was fine, right? So you can think of how that is, that and I would also abuse myself so much in my own brain with my own self, which I will explain later where this is coming from. But anyway, so when I do that in my own brain, and then if other people are doing the same or worse, or maybe less, but still, I wouldn't even notice it. So, and then what would happen usually is that I would be so busy figuring out how to stop that abuse from the others that I would never really think about how I'm doing that to myself. And if I didn't even know how to stop it within myself, I wouldn't even know how to stop it with other people, right? If I didn't even have the audacity or the firmness or even the courage to tell myself that I do not want to be treating myself this way, how could I even say it to others? Do you know what I mean? So that's why I think why it's important to know and realize and bring to our awareness our relationship with ourselves important is because of that. Because how we build any relationships in life, how we speak about what's going on, how we achieve our goals, how we structure our days, how we live our lives, really is coming from that source of how we are seeing ourselves and how we're treating ourselves. So another example that comes to mind is that most of my life, I grew up thinking that I'm not worthy, what I say is not important, what I want is not important, and therefore wanting to ignore all of that and just going off to be doing all the other people's what they thought was important, right? So whenever I ignored what was really important for me because I didn't think I was worthy, and my treatment of myself was that I wasn't worthy, and I just agreed and accepted it, then I was just so busy outside helping others or wanting to be useful for others to get their goals achieved and all of this stuff, and totally ignoring all the things of what's going on within me. So you can see why it's important to look at our relationship to ourselves is because how we live our lives is really how we're treating ourselves right? How we're building or how we are destroying that relationship with ourselves, that's then projecting with others as well. That's then projecting how we see the world, how we tackle the challenges, how we go after what's really important for us. Now, I've already spoken in these examples, but I really want to, again, maybe for the clarity's sake, stop at how do you know if you're like struggling to find really where you are in that spectrum, even though I think most of the time people are very clear as to where they fall in the spectrum. But if you're somehow having difficulty finding and very pinpointing, how do you know where you are in that spectrum of how you're treating yourself, how you are having your relationship with yourself, how that looks like? These are some of the ways that you could really look at it. So one of the ways that I can really see often is how are you dealing with mistakes, failures? Because oftentimes what happens is that we make a mistake, which is a human thing to do, and we never do it out of purposefully wanting it. We make a mistake, meaning we didn't intend, but this is what happened. And instead of learning our lessons, often what we do is we start punishing ourselves, we start criticizing ourselves, we start saying bad things about ourselves. And even if we don't say those things to ourselves, we keep thinking about them. And that's also another one that's very important, is that just because we don't say it does not mean that we're not thinking about it. So we keep thinking about it over and over again as to why it's wrong, why did we shouldn't have done it, why this should have been avoided, and all the things, instead of focusing on how not to do next time if we can. Right? So that's one of the best place to look at how is your relationship to yourself is when you make mistakes. How do you treat yourself when you make mistakes? I'm assuming some of you will say something like, I punish myself, or I want to punish myself, criticize myself. Other people may say, I look at it and then I say how it could be avoided. Other people could say, this is how it is, and just move on, right? So depending on how you say it, you will know where you are in that spectrum. And that spectrum is very nice as a visual, I think, for me at least, is to know those spectrum will show you how you're thinking about yourself. And that's also a very great place to have a look and see what are your opinions of yourself, right? Another way that you can see where you are in that spectrum is how you are approaching deadlines, how you are reacting to stressful situations, right? Or how you are building relationship with other people. For instance, as I said in one of my examples, is that if you are allowing abusive relationship to continue, that's probably also because you are allowing yourself to abuse yourself in your own mind, with your own talks, with your own saying things like you're just stupid, you're just incompetent, you're just not good at it, you shouldn't be even trusted to be doing this, who's you kidding, all of these talks, even if you're not saying them out loud, but you're believing them to be true, you are thinking about them. And those are there already. So hearing it from other people may not even be foreign to you. Like I was saying, my threshold was that as long as they don't beat me, it's fine. And then from that threshold, I went to, I don't want to hear these type of words, and I don't want to be treated this way. And these all came after I have really realized how my relationship to me was so shitty that I needed to build it up and clean that up, and then really look at it. How do I want to treat myself? How do I want to treat myself, and how do I want to be treated by others? Right? So when we have all of this, obviously, as I'm saying, that the reason why we're having those spectrum of relationship of, on the one side being punitive, on the other side being respectful and honoring. And the reason why we have that, obviously coming from some sort of programming from childhood, from other sources that we have had. Mine definitely came from my childhood, especially. I have realized that the way I treat myself is actually, on some of the days, the way my father used to treat me. This is how I treat myself, right? I have adopted his methods of how he used to treat me. And other days, I have my mother's ways of treating. I have adopted that. So I will give you an example so that it's maybe more visual or more clear. So the way my father used to treat me is, he would say something like, you have to force through and do the thing, get things done. It doesn't matter how, or it doesn't matter what you're feeling, whether you're not feeling good or whether you don't want to do it, you just have to do it. And the life is like this, it sucks, but you have to do it. And another way that my father used to treat me is with anger, right? He would get angry if I did something that he didn't approve. And the way that I treat myself sometimes is with anger. I get angry with myself and I get frustrated and I get this, you just have to do it. Why can't you just do it? This type of energy and approach I have adopted from him. And the other one that I have adopted from my mom is this, I have to just adjust and be accommodating, be flexible everywhere. I just shouldn't be um, sharing really what's important for me, because I don't really matter. What matters is everyone else. And I have adopted this approach, and the way that I would treat myself is saying like, well, I would never really set any boundaries and then just say, well, it's fine because what they're saying is very important. What I really say does not matter. And I have adopted that. And this is how I would really say, I wouldn't really look at what really matters to me, but I would just go off and being flexible and being available, being there for everyone else, but not me and myself. So when I have realized this, that I have this approaches that I have adopted from my mom and from my dad, I have also looked at what are the great things that I have adopted from them that's in my relationship with myself. So one of the things that I have adopted from my mom is this unconditional love that I'm now trying to grow. And I think I have that ability like my mom has. It has still to this day, and she always loves me no matter what. Whatever the mistakes I make, whatever the great things I make, she loves me. And I'm now nurturing that approach that I have within me that I have adopted from my mom. And the great one that I have adopted from my father is the courageousness, right? So I always treat myself as a courageous person. My father used to treat me that way. He used to say that you need to be a guy, because he, when he adopted, he didn't want a girl and I happened to be one. So he tried to make a boy out of me. So he would always treat me like a boy and say, you need to be courageous in order to get your agenda across, or, or achieve your goal, whatever, right? So I really treat myself as a courageous person, and that really helps me. So you can see that I have adopted a lot of approaches from my mom and from my dad. And of course, I'm very grateful for many of the things that I have done. But now, in the midst of this relationship with myself, where I have adopted some from my mom and dad and from other people, I'm now asking myself, what is the voice within me that's mine? Right? So I can hear my dad's voice or his approaches. I can hear and see and feel my mom's approaches when I'm treating myself and when I'm looking at things, when things don't work, when I make failures, or when I'm dealing with difficulties and challenges. I'm really then asking myself, what is my voice there? How do I want to treat myself? And these are the things that I came up that I really want to always rely on when I treat myself. So one of them is I want to treat myself with love and understanding no matter what I did. I always want to treat myself as a person who did things out of the best interest. I always want to treat myself relying on that inner freedom to be saying that I have done it out of love, out of freedom, not out of guilt, not out of resentment, not out of uh, other emotions that don't really serve me. I always find that voice within me that says, there is no need to punish. There is no need to get into this avoidance energy. There is no need to ignore things. I can always look at it. I can always honor it. I can always treat myself that courageous, that respectful, honoring person who is doing all of this out of good intentions, doing this to honor all those desires. And therefore, I want to just support her. I want to just honor her. I want to believe that whatever I'm doing it, I trust that I'm doing a good thing. I trust that what I'm doing is the right thing for me. And I do that, I always do that with compassion, with understanding, because that's what I do when I respect myself. That's what I do when I love myself. And that's what I do when I honor myself. Because I'm worthy of that treatment. That's because I'm worthy of that type of relationship. And I'm worthy of that nurturing and loving relationship with myself. So this is my voice that's coming up out of those voices that I hear when I treat myself, when I have this relationship with myself. It doesn't mean that I don't hear those father's punitive approaches. It doesn't mean I don't hear my mother's approaches of wanting to be flexible everywhere and not really hearing what I really want. I hear that sometimes. But then whenever I hear those voices, I immediately go to, what is it that I really want? How do I want to treat myself in this situation? How do I want to treat myself in the situation where my brain wants to really criticize? I always ask myself, does that really help? Does that really serve me? Is it really useful? If not, how else I could do it? How else I could have this relationship with myself? So this is what I wanted to offer to you. I see that I am a bit over time than the usual episodes, but I hope that this was helpful for you to think about your own relationship to yourself. Remember that this is one of the intimate, one of the best relationship you can build is when you really look at where you are in that spectrum and how do you want to go about it. And if you want to go to the side of respecting, honoring, trusting yourself, you can always start doing that as of now. You just ask yourself, what is it that you really want to? How you want to be treated by yourself? And how you want that relationship with yourself to be in order to make it very trusting, respecting, and honoring relationship. Okay, my dears, have a beautiful weekend and week, and I'll speak to you next time. Bye.